Juan, relativity, quantum theory are two of the most important things to understand the universe, but they're so mysterious. I mean, I try to study it, but it's not easy. So let's begin to understand what these two enormous ideas mean.
Well, relativity, especially the theory of general relativity, is a theory about space-time. And it's a theory of gravity. It tells us how masses curve space-time. Now, it's very easy to imagine a curved space. For example, the surface of a ball is a curved two-dimensional space. Now, it's a little harder to understand curved space-time. I mean, how does time come into the game and why it's curved? So let me just mention one thing. So saying that the space-time is curved is saying that the way time flows can change. And for example, if you are sitting at the bottom of the building, time will flow more slowly than if you're sitting at the top of a building. By a very tiny fraction. But saying that the space-time is curved is related to this changing flow of time.
So that seems so counterintuitive to the way we live lives, that if literally time is different between the top of a building and the bottom of a building.
Yeah, that certainly looks very counterintuitive, and we don't see it in our everyday life because it's a very small effect. Right. But it could be a big effect in other circumstances. For example, time on the surface of a neutron star flows at a rate which is 70% slower than time far away. So, and we can see this by looking.
So neutrons are a very, very dense star.
Right, exactly. It's a very heavy, very dense star that curves space-time very much.
And so time would flow 70% slower than what we experience.
Yeah, that's right. Oh. So it can be a bigger effect. And of course, the other amazing thing is that space can expand. So this whole space-time can expand, and somehow you have two galaxies and new space is created in the middle, and it seems that out of nothing you create space, and it's surprising, but this is what the theory is telling us. Yeah. And this is what we see also experimentally.
And as the universe expands, the space can expand faster than the speed of light, even though nothing in the universe can go faster than the speed of light.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So this is the problem of creating horizons. So there are regions that we cannot achieve. I mean, if something is moving further and faster than the speed of light, it cannot send us any signal. Yeah. And this is also a surprising aspect. It also occurs in the interior of black holes. When things fall into a black hole, they fall so fast, let's say, that they create a horizon. And things that cross the horizon cannot send signals back out. And so these things happen because the theory of gravity is a theory of space and time. And so, and while the relationship between space and time is telling us how signals propagate. And so the shape of space-time can forbid us from seeing certain regions. And so this is...
so this really characterizes the whole universe to really understand how relativity works.
Yeah, that's right. So the geometry of space-time tells us how particles move, the things we can see, the things we cannot see. And it suddenly determined the origin and the evolution of the universe from its very small size to this very huge microscopic size.
And where it will go in the future.
Yeah, and where it will go in the future, exactly.
Good. Okay, now quantum theory.
Yeah.
That seems so mysterious also because it lacks certainty.
Right, yeah, this is amazing. It lacks certainty, and also there is some intrinsic randomness, and depending on what question you ask to the system, you might get different answers, and things depend on the order you ask questions, and it is as if you're not looking, the system is doing one thing, and when you look, it does something different. So this I find extremely surprising. And and important thing is that the randomness is a peculiar randomness. It's not that the electron doesn't know what it's doing. There is something well defined about the electron. So there are some laws that define in a somewhat deterministic way how the probabilities evolve. So the probabilities evolve. Well, actually, the probability amplitude, which is kind of a square root of the probability, some very more abstract notion. But that thing evolves continuously. On the other hand, when we probe the system, we get random results. But this is one of the surprising...
The random results we get are not because our apparatus is bad. It's because fundamentally...
Yeah, it's this fundamental thing, and it's important is the square root of the probability that is the thing that evolves continuously. And there have been precise experiments showing that it's not some intrinsic randomness and so on, but it's really this this wave function, which is called, that is determining how the system is behaving.
Yeah, and that and particles and it can be a wave or a particle sort of at the same time, which
right.
again is difficult to understand.
Yeah, this is difficult to imagine, but there are precise equations behind all this. So even though it's difficult to imagine, the amazing thing is that we have precise equations and they allow us to calculate. And so they're not intuitive. I mean, it's not that you can work with these equations and you still find effects that are not intuitive, and you can calculate them and so on, and you know that's the answer the theory tells you. But it's hard to get a good intuition for it.
I think Richard Feynman once said that if you think you understand quantum mechanics, that proves that you don't.
Yeah, I completely agree with this. Yeah. and the best proof of that is that there are always some counterintuitive effects that people discover in quantum mechanics.
Yeah, what are some examples?
Well, this idea that quantum information is this very surprising object, and I think quantum computation is, for example, a very nice example. So there are some things that you can do in quantum computation that you just can't imagine how you could do them classically. The best example is this example where you can write a quantum program to search a list of elements, a list of n elements, and naively you would say, in order to search an element in a list of n possibilities, it will take you time of order n, because you have to look at each one and see whether it's the one you want or not.
Yes.
So maybe half of the time you'll find it, but it's of order n, maybe n over 2 and so on. But using quantum mechanics, you can get this in a number of orders square root of n, so a time of order square root of n. So it's this speed up that you get.
So classically, you'd have to, for each of these n possibilities, you'd have to search each one, and it would take you n time.
Right.
But in using quantum mechanics, you get square root, which is a much smaller number.
Yeah, that's right. In a way, you can search a list of 100 elements in 10 steps, while naively we have taken 100 steps or 50 steps.
And that's because of that quantum...
it's the quantum aspect of information,
Because it can be in different states at the same time. Superposition.
Yeah, that's right.
And so by the superposition, it enables us to do simultaneous things?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's the amazing thing about quantum mechanics.
Wow. What is some of your own work in the field?
Yeah, so I work on an area which is called string theory, and string theory is a theory of quantum gravity that tries to put together quantum mechanics and gravity. And putting these two together is important for describing some things about the universe, most notably the Big Bang. So in the Big Bang, the whole universe was concentrated in a very small region. And quantum effects are very important for small things, and gravity also for heavy things. And the whole universe is very heavy and very small, so quantum mechanics was important. Now, some of our theories of the early universe say that the early universe is expanding very rapidly. And as it expands, the fields or the particles that live on this universe, classically you would say, well, they fill this expanding universe and they could be uniform, so that you could have a uniform distribution of particles. But quantum mechanics implies an intrinsic randomness, an intrinsic probability. We discuss probability and so on. So you cannot say that things are completely uniform. There will be some randomness. Things will be slightly non-uniform. And these non-uniformities will then affect the later evolution of the universe. And this got imprinted in the cosmic microwave radiation, and then it produced the galaxies that we now see. So these very small things were expanded to huge distances and formed the largest structures that we see. So we see this unity between the smallest distances we can imagine and the longest distances we can imagine. And quantum mechanics is important for the smallest thing, like atoms and so on, and also for the very big things. So the link is also provided by the theory of relativity, the theory that tells us that space-time can expand and take small things to big things.
So how has your own work helped to give us understanding?
One would like to understand quantum gravity. And in principle, one would like to understand quantum gravity for all kinds of spacetimes. But there are some situations, some special spacetimes, which are simpler. So let's imagine the simplest possible spacetimes. So we can have a flat spacetime, where nothing is expanding, nothing is contracting. We can have a positively curved spacetime, and that is physically is an expanding universe, similar to the early universe description. And we can also have a negatively curved spacetime. So those are the three simplest spacetimes. And my own work has revolved around the question of giving a complete quantum description of the negatively curved spacetimes.
So that's sort of like a saddle or something.
Yeah, it's called a hyperboloid. So if a positively curved space is the surface of a sphere,
yes,
right? It's easy to imagine. A negatively curved space is sort of like a saddle, like a point on a saddle of a horse saddle.
Right.
But we cannot really embed the whole surface in 3 dimensions, so it's harder to visualize.
Right.
But nevertheless, one can draw pictures and so on. There are some beautiful leisure pictures of this. And in addition, we have time. So it's a negatively curved space and time. Okay. And so this is, for some mathematical reasons, is slightly simpler than the other cases. And well, one of the simplicities is that the whole universe is not expanding or contracting, so it exists forever. And also another interesting aspect is that it has some kind of boundary far away. So there is some region far away that is well defined and neither contracts or expands. Mm-hmm. And we can describe this whole universe in terms of a theory that lives on this boundary. And the theory that lives on the boundary is a theory that doesn't have gravity. So it's similar to the theories we use to describe particle physics. So it's an ordinary quantum mechanical theory of particles. And the advantage of it is that we know exactly what those laws are, while the laws of quantum gravity are not so clear. And so it gives us a clear description of quantum gravity in these spacetimes.
So in essence, what it is it's like a translation, a Rosetta Stone between quantum gravity, which we don't know, and the laws of particle physics, which we do know. So it gives a translation. Right.
It gives us really a description of a quantum spacetime. Wow. So how you describe a spacetime quantum mechanically. And one of the surprising features is that this is not a theory that lives in the dimensions of the spacetime, right? So if we have a 4-dimensional spacetime, the theory we use to describe it lives on the boundary, which has one less dimension. And spacetime is not there in the beginning. Spacetime emerges out of the interactions of these particles.
Wow.
In a way, an analogy is that spacetime is like the surface of a lake. So the surface of a lake looks like a very well-defined surface. But when you look at it microscopically, you see the water molecules coming in and out of the surface. It's not really well defined. In a similar way, here, space-time is a continuum, classically. But when you look at it with very fine resolutions, at very short distances, it's fluctuating and so on. And the best way to describe these fluctuations is in terms of particles that don't live in this space-time, but they live on the boundary far away.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to see that there are some mysteries that you face as well, because this is just an incredible area for really probing the nature of what reality is.
Right, yeah, we'd like to understand what space-time really is. I think this question is fundamental for understanding the beginning of the universe, because at the beginning of the universe it looks like time began. So we need to understand time, the beginning of time. So how can time begin? And so that's a crucial question.